Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. Jamie and John here with a case we should have covered years ago.
I'm very familiar with this case and a little bit surprised we haven't already, but we haven't, and we're here today to talk about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one. So we'll get to that in a second. Just want to one more shout out for CrimeCon. We're just a couple weeks out at this point, which is wild to me. So we're excited to see everybody out there. If you haven't registered, you can use the code CrimeCast to get 10% off, and we would love to see you out there.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it. Also want to say that I'm looking forward to Patreon because we've had some new members join over the last week. So I want to give a special shout out. First, I want to thank Laura, came in at the $3 a month level. So thank you, Laura. And then Jamie, we have Heather B. Heather joined at the $10 a month level, took advantage of the annual membership. So Jamie, she's going to be set for a year of True Crime Cast, but she also will, she'll get the regular content early and ad free, the bonus episodes, but she gets a special shout out from Jamie. You have the floor, my man.
Absolutely. Heather B, it's individuals like you that keep us on the air, that keep us coming back week after week for 8 years. We would not have been able to do this without people on Patreon. So Heather, we greatly appreciate it. Reach out, send us a message. Let us know what episodes you like and suggest some new ones so that we can add more to the docket.
Absolutely. All right, man. With that housekeeping out of the way, why don't you get the ball rolling?
And here's the thing. We're talking about Henry Lee Lucas today, and there are so many times when we start to research and we're like, wait, we've done this before.
This was definitely one of those.
It was one of those, mostly I think because the name is notable and we just made assumptions that we had done it before, but also just the overlap and consistency with the Otis Toole case, which we have covered, was pretty fascinating. So we're going to talk about Henry Lee Lucas. He was born on August 23rd of 1936. Grew up in a pretty poor family. They lived in a one-room log cabin in Blacksburg, Virginia, which in the 30s wasn't that uncommon, especially for that area. His mom, whose name was Viola Lucas, was an alcoholic. She had 7 kids, of which Henry was the youngest. She often made ends meet by being a sex worker. His father was a double amputee who lost both of his legs in a freight train accident. Lucas would later say that my daddy didn't do anything. He just sold pencils.
The old pencil pusher.
Some rumors in town, however, suggest that his dad was actually his mother's boss or sex work handler. The word is pimp, but I tried to make it sound better.
P-I-M-P, baby.
She would sometimes force her sons and husband to watch her have sex with her clients. And this is while they were really young, John. And you know more than anybody that the trauma that kids suffer, the sexual trauma sticks with you and changes you in ways that few other things do. Would you agree with that, or am I making assumptions?
Absolutely. This is a tough one, man. Like, I remember a case I worked or at least was a part of where children would see this kind of stuff, even to the point where like they could imitate, like, oh, somebody's leaving mom's bedroom. They better give me the money, that kind of thing. It's just awful that kids have to experience that, but it seems like what he and his siblings had to go through.
So Henry did not like this. He did not want to watch. And one day he refused, and she decided to beat him over it, which she often abused him anyway. But in this instance, she grabbed a wooden paddle and struck him in the head repeatedly until he did what she called playing dead, which was actually a coma. He went into a coma from being beat in the head by his mother, which had lasting brain trauma in addition to the emotional trauma this caused.
The physical abuse wouldn't stop there. When he was 10 years old, he actually had a brother who stabbed him in the head with a knife. And his mom knew that he was injured, but ignored it for several days. And I don't know that she would have intervened in any way, but a teacher happened to punish the kid by hitting him in the face with a ruler at school, which, this hopefully doesn't happen now, but back then it happened. I mean, you and I were paddled in school, never in the face though. So this
Never
is
in the face.
This, even outside of the normalcy of getting a paddling in school, I don't think that what this teacher did was in any way normal for the time, but she swiped him in the face with a ruler and it actually burst his eyeball. So somehow during the stabbing injury that he received from his brother, his eye became so infected that that swipe was enough to make his eyeball burst. So he actually had to have his eye removed and replaced with a prosthetic eye, a glass eye, if you will. So these injuries eventually led to damages to Lucas's frontal and temporal lobes, and the parts of his brain that were related to emotional control were damaged. Not good for anybody, right? So Lucas was frequently bullied as a kid, and when he was asked about his childhood, he just would say, "I hated all my life. I hated everybody when I first grew up, and when I can first remember, I was dressed as a girl by my mother, and I stayed that way for 2 or 3 years, and after that, I was treated like what I call the dog of the family. I was beaten, and I was made to do things that no human being would ever want to do." End quote. That was him describing his childhood.
For each case, especially when we talk about serial killers, we dig into the why behind they turned into often the monster that they became. And usually we can point to, maybe it was this thing, that thing probably weighed on it. It's almost like somebody said, hey, let's just put all of the possible childhood trauma on one kid as we can. Let's have some sexual abuse, some head injury, dad not really in the picture. It was everything, John.
It was, this is bad. This is really bad. And these are only the things we know about. We've highlighted a couple of big events, but you've got to imagine that every single day for this kid was hell.
He dropped out of school in 6th grade. Again, back in that, I don't know, people didn't finish school very often. So dropping out 6th grade may be a little early, but a lot of people didn't finish high school back then. So not completely surprised by that. So he started to move around and live in various places around Virginia. Now, he claimed that he committed his first murder was when he was 14. And that's going to be a theme of today's case is what did Henry Lee Lucas do versus what he said he did. He said that he strangled a 17-year-old woman named Everline Burnsley. The evidence doesn't necessarily add up to where you say, oh yeah, well, he definitely did this. She disappeared from a bus stop in Lynchburg, Virginia in March of 1951. He said he picked her up from there and she refused his sexual advances, so he started raping her. And when he was unable to do so, he killed her and buried her body in a secluded wooded area. Later, Lucas recanted this confession, and her body's never been found, so it's not like he led authorities to the body and they confirmed it was him. This was just one of his many, 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 many confessions that have a lot of doubt to go along with them.
In late 1959, he would travel to Tecumseh, Michigan to live with his half-sister, Opal. At this point, 23-year-old Lucas was engaged to his pen pal, Stella Curtis. Dude, do you remember having a pen pal when you were growing up? I know this guy's significantly older than us, but that was something I had back then.
Yeah, it was something we talked about. I think we did some things in school where we had a pen pal with somebody in another country or something. It was, instead of sending emails or texts, you would write things on paper, put them in your mailbox and send them messages. It was a wild time to be alive.
With a pencil that you could buy from a pencil salesman. Now, I don't remember pencil salesman, but we did have pencils. So Stella Curtis, and they are engaged while he's incarcerated, and that's when they are writing these letters back and forth. So his mama came to visit him for Christmas, and she told him that she did not approve of his fiancée. She told Lucas that he needed to move back home with her to Blacksburg in order to take care of her as she got older. And Lucas refused. He did not want to go, and they started to argue. So the fighting got worse and worse, and then it grew until January 11th of 1960, and that's when his mama took a broom and hit him over the head with it. Now, at that point, Lucas had had enough, and he snapped. He ended up stabbing his mom in the neck and then left the house. He did not wait to see if she needed any help or if she was going to pull through. He just stabbed her and then left. And when Opal came home, that's when she found her mother was still alive on the bedroom floor in a pool of her own blood. So she called an ambulance, but it was too late at that point.
So this is one of the actual confirmed murders of Henry Lee Lucas was his mom. And by all accounts, if you don't believe his first confession, this may have been his first murder. Later, he would be arrested in the state of Ohio on the outstanding warrant from killing his mother in Michigan. He claimed that he killed his mom in self-defense, but that defense did not work. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. While he was in prison, Lucas attempted suicide several times, so he was ultimately transferred to the Iona State Hospital, where he received electric shock therapy, behavior therapy, and lots of antidepressants. We don't do a lot of electroshock therapy nowadays, John. It's literally sending electrodes directly into your brain, and now it's looked at as being cruel and unusual punishment, but that's what he went through. He spent 4 years at the hospital before he was finally sent back to prison in 1966. After serving 10 years there, he was released in 1970 because the prison was becoming overcrowded. So you've got somebody of second-degree murder that you're letting out because there are too many people in prison. I feel like there may have been some other people you could have let out.
Or not let anybody out and just build a second prison.
There you go. That's,
I mean,
good problem solving.
It's but I mean, it is a lot of tax money. I get that, but still, you have to not let violent criminals out before their call to justice is over. In December of 1971, he was charged and sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempting to abduct a 15-year-old girl at gunpoint. So definitely can say without a shadow of a doubt that he was not rehabilitated in prison. Probably should not have been let out early, right? While serving this sentence, he began writing to a woman named Betty Crawford. Now, this was actually his cousin's widow. So after he was released in 1975, he moved to Pennsylvania, where he would begin his relationship with her as a married couple. They got married, and he moved in with her and her 2 daughters. Not the kind of person I would want to move in with my young daughters.
Right. This was set up for failure from the beginning and for people to be hurt. Just a horrific situation.
He did get a job. He started working on a mushroom farm, but this life that he had built was going to be very short-lived. Betty left Lucas in 1976 because she thought that he had molested her daughters. So she leaves, takes the girls with them, and that's when he relocates to Jacksonville, Florida. And that's where he would meet and become friends with Otis Toole. Jamie, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, Otis Toole, another serial killer that confessed to many more crimes than anybody actually believes he committed. He was linked at one point to the Adam Walsh murder of John Walsh's son. He's a bad guy, and for these two to connect was not good for anybody.
So they met at a soup kitchen, and then just a couple of years later, 1978, Lucas moved in with Toole and Toole's mom in Springfield, Florida. So while living with them, he's now 42 years old, and he became close to Toole's 11-year-old niece named Frida Lorene Powell, also known as Becky. So we're going to call her Becky from here on out. Now, Becky had a mild intellectual disability and had escaped from a juvenile detention center.
Yeah, I think that either Otis or Henry gave her the nickname Becky because Becky does not fit in with any of her actual names. But she was young, like you said. She was 11 when he met her, and he started a unhealthy relationship with her. I mean, this is the very definition of grooming while he was doing this. I want to go back to his first marriage, his marriage to Betty Crawford, and where it was suspected that he sexually assaulted her daughters. He was never charged for this, but most people believe, given given his history and the way he talked about leaving Betty at the time, that he probably did sexually assault these little girls. So again, more bad behavior that could have been prevented if he had not been let out of prison.
Yeah. I mean, the time frame lines up. He should not have been out of jail.
So he's in Florida with Otis Toole from 1979 to 1981. He lived there with his family, and he and Otis worked together for a roofing company. At this time, I mentioned he started grooming her when she was 11. He started having, I'm not going to say romantic relationship. He started sexually assaulting her when she was still young. In 82, Lucas convinced the then 15-year-old Becky, and reminder, he's in his 40s, to run away with him to avoid child welfare authorities. They traveled around and eventually made their way out to California. Part of why they were moved out there is because they were referred to by some family members to move out there and take care of 82-year-old Kate Rich. Becky and Lucas moved in with her, and 3 weeks later, Kate Rich went missing. Lucas and Becky were nowhere to be found. Relatives quickly discovered that checks had been written from Kate's bank account and that Lucas was likely the culprit. And despite them being there to take care of Kate, living with Kate, they took advantage of her. And people in the community immediately knew that she was missing, and they named Lucas as the suspect. So when we get back from the break, we'll talk about them looking for Henry Lee Lucas and trying to pin him for the murder or disappearance of Kate Rich.
So while they were on the run, they were actually hitchhiking. So Lucas and Becky were trying to get anywhere they could via hitchhiking, and they were picked up once by a minister of a Pentecostal religious commune called the House of Prayer. Now, this is in Stoneburg, Texas. So the minister thought that Becky and Lucas were a married couple. Wouldn't you? I don't know. If I saw them out, I would assume that this was a dad and a daughter. But
yeah, they definitely have that age discrepancy, but I mean, at that time, we're still talking about, well, I mean, it's the 80s, so people were getting married a lot younger. I don't know. Maybe she just looked much older.
Yeah, maybe.
Trying to give this minister the benefit of the doubt in some way.
So he found Lucas a job as a roofer. He has experience with that, and then he would let the two of them stay in a small apartment on the commune. Becky didn't love it there, though. She became argumentative, and she became homesick for Florida. And then, one day, she was gone. Lucas told everyone that Becky got on a bus and left town. On June 10th, 1983, Lucas was arrested on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm by the Texas Rangers. While in custody, he confessed to murdering Becky and Kate Rich. So Becky, Jamie, looks like she didn't get on a bus and go back to Florida. It looks like he's been arrested for her murder. He told the authorities that he got Becky out into a field in Denton, Texas. This would be on August 23rd of 1982. He said that he stabbed her in the chest, sexually assaulted her when she was already dead, dismembered her, and then scattered the pieces of the body throughout that field. That is probably one of the most wild sentences I've said in a long time.
Yeah, and he had always been interested in sexual activity with things that were not living. He would often kill animals just to have sex with their corpse. So he was sick in that way, and he wanted this to be his last experience with Becky.
So he also admitted that he asked Kate to join him in the search for Becky at a campground. And then Lucas stabbed her in the chest, violated her dead body, and then put her in a drainage pipe. So he led police to her remains, but the coroner was unable to identify positively either corpse.
Yeah, and as much of a liar as he is, he did lead authorities to bodies. Now, at the time, they couldn't necessarily ID which one was which, but I think he definitely committed a murder here. Did he kill both of them? Probably. Which one did he lead authorities to? Impossible to say, but I do think this was a murder that Henry Lee Lucas committed, both the murder of Becky and of Kate. So these are two that I actually believe that he was a part of. When he was arraigned for the murders of Becky and Kate, he asked the judge, "What are we going to do about the other 100 women I killed?" Talk about an opening statement. And he did readily confess as soon as he was brought in on the weapons charge, "I killed Kate and Becky." And this is where we start to see, I don't know, almost the investigation, the story get away from people, because he starts confessing to murder after murder. And of course, you have the authorities who are looking to close cases. You have the media who think this is an incredible story. And you have families of missing people looking for answers. So this is a perfect storm of people giving Henry their attention, which is something he didn't get a lot as a kid. He confessed to, ultimately in his life, hundreds, some would say thousands of actual murders. There was so much to look into that they created their own task force in the Texas Rangers just to investigate these crimes that Lucas claimed he was committed. According to Lucas, when he was living with Otis Toole, he and Toole went on a multi-state killing spree where they targeted hitchhikers, sex workers, and migrants. He also claimed that Toole took part in cannibalism. Lucas said that Becky would join them, watch, and sometimes help lure potential victims out into secluded areas. This is a quote from Lucas after he was arrested in the middle of all these confessions. He said, "I killed him every way there is except poison. There's been strangulations, there's been knifings, there's been shootings, there's been hit and runs. I don't have any emotions. I had no feelings for the people themselves or any of my crimes. I'd pick them up hitchhiking, running and playing, stuff like that. We'd get to going and having a good time. First thing you know, I'd killed her and throwed her out somewhere. I don't know how to really explain why I kept on. It was just, like I say, as though I left my body. And just as though the more you look at them, as though that person wasn't dead. And you just keep stabbing them and imagining that person's not dying." So this seems like a big rant of somebody out of their mind, John.
Absolutely. So his claims and confessions actually just sparked a frenzy within law enforcement. Police officers from across the country came in to interview him. All in all, he was interviewed for over 3,000 murder cases. Now, to be clear, that does not mean that he murdered 3,000 people, but that he was interviewed for that many. But the task force did officially clear hundreds of unsolved homicides based on his confessions. I would love to spend a significant time of my life researching each of those cases to know if in fact Lucas was involved in those murders.
I tried wrapping my mind around this. If you're going to confess to over 3,000 murders, like how long would that take? And how would he have known? Was he just saying, well, I killed a person here, a person there? Did he have names? What did these confessions look like? Because I think it would be hard to confess to 3,000 murders. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast today. Like, how am I supposed to remember, especially if he's done it thousands of times? It seems like something that you would stop remembering the vivid details of.
And what I'm wondering is, did he actually confess to these, or did police officers have even the slightest tie to him? Like perhaps he was in the area and there are 15 unsolved murders. Did they just interview him for all 15 of those to see if there's a possibility he was involved? I don't know, but I don't think he killed thousands of people.
I agree.
So Lucas would confess to unsolved murders, and when he did do that, he received some special treatment. This is not okay. I remember doing my very first investigation. I wasn't very well trained going into it. My training was observing. So one of the things I recalled vividly was before anything was asked, before any questions were asked by the investigator that I was shadowing, she made sure to say, "I want you to understand anything you tell me is voluntary. I am not promising you or offering you anything for this conversation. Do you agree?" and they would have to say yes before the conversation would continue. That I don't think can be said of Lucas.
Not at all.
So when he would confess, he would get some perks. He would get cigarettes. He would get hamburgers and other rewards. He was able to walk around without handcuffs, and he would often be seen drinking strawberry milkshakes. I would imagine that strawberry milkshakes in prison would be like, I don't know, pretty awesome.
I doubt that's a regular treat that they get.
There even began to be a bit of friendliness between he and the authorities. As officers brought him more and more cases, he would continue to confess. Ultimately, he did confess to around 600 unsolved cases. And because of that, he has become known as America's most prolific serial killer.
I don't buy most of it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The more I learn about this guy, the less I trust anything that comes out of his mouth. I think it's hard to trust somebody that kills anyway, because you're going to lie to cover it up. You're going to lie to lure people in. I have a hard time believing that he killed more than a handful of people, but we'll dig back into that later. In 1985, journalist Hugh Ainsworth wrote a piece for the Dallas Times outlining the geographical logistics of all of Lucas's locations. They basically proved that it was impossible for Lucas to have been at every murder that he confessed to. For example, he confessed to one murder that took place in Houston in September of 1982, but at the time, he was in jail in Maryland. He also confessed to a murder in 1975 in Texas, but employment records show that he was working on a mushroom farm in Pennsylvania on that very day. The journalist calculated that Lucas would have had to use his 13-year-old Ford station wagon to go 11,000 miles in 1 month to have committed all these crimes that he admitted to, and that's assuming that he could actually make it back and forth. Decades later, DNA testing has also shown that he was lying about at least 20 other murders that they were able to connect somebody to or eliminate him from based on DNA results. Once this was revealed, the Texas Attorney General said, when Lucas was confessing to hundreds of murders, those with custody of Lucas did nothing to bring an end to this hoax. We found information that would lead us to believe that some officials cleared cases just to get them off the books.
And that makes sense. I mean, I hate to say that, but yeah, I mean, if you have cases that you want to get cleared, why not throw them at this guy who you see as somebody who's going to confess, right?
There's definitely a motivation there.
It's so unfortunate, albeit tragic. So this case damaged the reputation of the Texas Rangers because of everything that happened. They had to reevaluate their techniques, and there was a greater awareness of the possibility of false confessions because of Lucas. It was also revealed that authorities would let Lucas see the case files so he could, quote unquote, refresh his memory. So yeah, if you know, that's a technique. If the confessor says something about the crime scene or about the victim that only police would know, that, you know, kind of narrows it down to, okay, this guy has knowledge of the fact. Well, if he's reading the case file, of course he's going to have knowledge.
Right.
So it's ridiculous. They also would not allow his interviews to be recorded. So there was no way to know how much information was leaked to Lucas by the investigators before he would confess. So in total, he was convicted of 11 murders, including the deaths of his mom, Becky Powell, and Kate Rich. Most of his confessions have been discredited, but he and Toole do still remain as like one of the most prolific serial killers around, and remain credible suspects in the deaths of several more women. Some members of law enforcement still believe that Lucas was responsible for a massive number of killings, but those have not been proven to be true.
Yeah, and a lot of those have been discredited. And, you know, it's interesting. The whole he being with Otis Toole thing is wild in that we've covered a lot of killer couples and teams of people doing this. And usually there's a dominant person, a submissive person, and we don't really flesh that out in their relationship. And they claim to have killed some people together and some separately. And that's just very, very rare to find that. So very odd set of circumstances. So, of course, he was sentenced to years and years and life sentences in prison. But there was one case that he got the death sentence for. That was the case of a Jane Doe who everybody very unfortunately just referred to as orange socks because that's all she was wearing when her body was recovered. This happened in Williamson County, Texas in Halloween of 1979. And that was one that he confessed to and just came out and talked about. He said she had been strangled, which hadn't been released to the public, but some people believe that the officers let him in on that secret to help him, like you said earlier, refresh his memory. He was convicted of her murder, even though there was a timesheet showing that at the time he was working at his roofing job with Otis Toole in Jacksonville, Florida. In August of 2019, Orange Socks was finally identified after the DNA Doe Project identified a potential cousin of hers. Her actual name is Deborah Jackson. She had worked 2 jobs at the Ramada Inn in Amarillo and an assisted living facility in Azle, Texas. So she was hitchhiking when she was killed. It was announced that DNA from her socks contained the profile from 2 or more males, and neither of them has been identified or linked back to Henry Lee Lucas. So it's very, very, very unlikely that he committed this murder. Again, it's another one he confessed to, but for this one, they gave him the death sentence.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that a little wild that he received the death sentence, but there's also, I mean, as far as I heard, and I could be wrong, but there was no DNA linked to him, but there was a DNA linked to 2 other unidentified males.
Well, he was sentenced way before the DNA was able to be assessed.
Right. It's just, that just goes to show you though, some of these death penalty cases are tragic because number one, you may be killing someone who was not involved, but also just because there was a sentence and a conviction does not mean that justice was served because potentially the murderer is still out there. So he was given a stay on his death sentence after it was uncovered that the details in his confession came from the case file that he was allowed to read. And that death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment by then Governor George W. Bush in 1998. Now, while in prison, he allegedly became a born-again Christian, and he would spend the last 18 years of his life as a model prisoner. However, on March 12, 2001 at 11 p.m., he was found dead in his prison cell and was pronounced dead from a congestive heart failure, basically a heart attack. He was 64 years old. So, Jamie, that wraps up Henry Lee Lucas. I feel like you and I are on the same page, but do you feel like he murdered more or less than, let's say, 20 people?
I would say that's a max. I would say it's less than that. It's possible he got up to 20. I would say it's more likely to be between 5 and 10. We've only confirmed 3, and since we found out that so many of his other confessions are lies, why would I believe any of the other confessions?
Yeah, I don't think he killed that many people. Obviously, he is not a good dude. I mean,
Right.
To be clear, he did kill his own mom, and then at least 3 other people that I would feel comfortable saying that he did. But yeah, I don't think he killed that many. I think this was it makes me think of the movie or the series that we watched a long time ago, Blackbird.
Yeah.
Where maybe he was a little bit slower. Maybe he had some cognitive issues because of all the physical abuse that he went through as a kid.
Yeah, his IQ was measured at about 80 after he woke up from the coma that his mom beat him into.
Yeah, so I think cognitively, authorities saw this as a guy who wanted to confess for the perks and was able to clear up some cases that had been lingering for too long.
They almost saw it as a win-win because he got the attention, they got to close their cases, and they got to give families the illusion of some type of closure. So, but it's not, because it's not real. It's not real justice when the actual killers are out there. So it was a horrible situation. It took the Texas Rangers a long time to rebuild their reputation after that, as they were thought of, and I think now probably thought of as one of the top agencies in the country. But it was a rough time, and that was, I don't know, 80s and 90s was like serial killer central.
Did they bring in Chuck Norris for Walker, Texas Ranger, only to make their reputation better?
I think they did. I was about to say he would have caught Henry Lee Lucas before his first murder.
I mean, I say that jokingly, but the time frame fits.
So they put that show out right after this. You're not wrong.
I'm joking, but also I need to look more into that because it's interesting time frame wise.
The eyes of a ranger are upon you.
Yeah.
This is I think he killed people. I don't think we need to give him attention or credit, even though he's no longer alive for most of those. So I hate that he was given the attention that he desired for these. And I hope someday we do find justice for the families that were given false justice by these confessions.
I hope you're right, man. I appreciate you guys sticking around, tuning in each and every week, and especially thank you to those who have joined Patreon. If you haven't already done so, $3 a month gets you access to a bonus episode each and every month, and you get our normal show early and ad-free.
Yep, we really appreciate you guys and really, really hope to meet so many of you at CrimeCon out in Denver here in just a few weeks. If you are going, email us, hit us up on social media, anywhere we're at True Crime Cast, and let us know that you'll be there, and we'll look out for you.
Until next crime, this has been True Crime Cast.
You've listened to True Crime Cast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.